The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome back, public webinar aficionados. This is Leroy in the Chiron and Aries Archetypes and Cycles series. This is a two-part series. We had the first part Monday night. And just a reminder to be looking for the PDFs to both part 1 and part 2 coming in the follow-up email from GoToWebinar immediately after. Well, it'll be within 24 hours after tonight's broadcast. I got a little editing to do and package it up and everything. But there'll be links to both PDFs coming directly from GoToWebinar in a follow-up email. So that's the new coaching. We're trying to eliminate the needs for lots of emails flying back and forth, getting on these webinars and getting the material afterward. We had a lot of value with the PDFs. And as many of you know, that PDF will contain all the audio video links, including an MP3 download, an MP3 audio, and the actual video webinar right there on the first page of the PDF. So thank you for understanding the process by now. And of course, we are still looking for a couple of enrollments that will then become chart examples for the 6-part series coming up the next 3 consecutive Monday and Wednesday nights as well. So consider that, and I'll turn it over to Kim Marie.
Following on that vein of thought, I think it's 2nd house, 3rd house, and 5th or 6th. I have been prepping, so I haven't been keeping up on the details of the email world. So I don't know if it's changed or not. You can check with Leroy or me tomorrow. So as Leroy said, thank you, everyone. Welcome to Chiron in Aries. As you can see on your screen, 2018 through 2027. It's just a little over 8 years in the sign of Aries as it initiates a new cycle through the zodiac. First of all, though, oops, here, I think I got it. Okay, there. Our housekeeping slide. Here at the Evolutionary Astrology Network, you can study with us 3 different ways. You can listen to our free weekly audio podcasts. You can subscribe to our Astral Library. We have 3 different sections. You can subscribe 1, 6, or 12 months, or you can do a monthly recurring that you cancel at any time. And then, of course, we also have our Evolutionary Astrology course in 3 different segments. Segments 1 and 2 have the option of coming materials only, digital only, or both materials and digital. If you want more information, you see at the phone number 605-348-5111 or email us at evolutionaryastrology.net. All right. Here's those dates of Chiron in Aries coming up. We're at the time of this broadcast, we are about 2 months away before Chiron moves into Aries. As you can see, it dips back into Pisces, and it'll eventually end up in Taurus, dipping back into Aries 2026-27. Here is the orbit of Chiron. We're going to be working with the cycles part of Chiron tonight. And as you can see visually here on your screen, this white circle is Chiron, and its revolution around the sun is quite eccentric, as the word is known. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, they look pretty circular around the sun, although they all will have their closest and their furthest point away from the sun. But the fact that Chiron is so erratic in its distance from the sun, it creates a very eccentric cycle around the zodiac. Chiron will actually spend 3/5 of its cycle in only 4 signs of the zodiac. As you see this right here, Chiron will spend 30 years in Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, and Taurus. and it will spend 20 years in the other 8 signs. So this is a visual to show you how slowly it moves through these signs and how fast it moves through these other 8 signs of the zodiac. Just briefly, the Chiron archetype. Barbara Hand-Clow is credited with giving Chiron the term rainbow bridge. And that's because its orbit lies between Saturn and Uranus. Saturn, the individuated consciousness in evolutionary astrology, and Uranus, the individuated unconsciousness in EA. And so Chiron is that rainbow bridge between the conscious and unconscious bodies. And so Chiron goes both directions. It is a bi-planet. Conscious part wants to, with Chiron, we have the struggle to get into the body, to stay in the body, to be grounded in the body, and yet raise or expand consciousness at the same time. The unconscious part of it is where it gets associated with shamanism and the ancient wisdoms. And of course, as you look at these archetypes, you can also see how they easily relate to the polarity of Virgo and Pisces. Barbara Hand-Clow feels that Chiron has rulership of Virgo. Evolutionary astrology doesn't have any consensus on that. There's a lot of variety amongst astrologers. Some feel that Chiron could rule Sagittarius. I don't know if there's any other archetypes out there, but I do know those two. Virgo probably gets the highest number of votes from astrologers who want to give Chiron a rulership in the zodiac. It's also very well known as the wounded healer. And this is coming from the mythology of the figure Chiron. Chiron was a centaur, and the centaurs in mythology, all of them except Chiron were kind of hedonistic. They were, drunks and violent and vicious and, just no discipline. Chiron was the opposite. Chiron was the teacher of the healing arts, ruling astrology, tarot, as you see on the screen at the bottom, palmistry, anything that is healing with the hands, because kairos is a Greek origin word. And so then, what the mythology of Chiron was that Chiron was wounded with an arrow by Hercules, and he couldn't heal his wound, and yet he was an immortal god. So he made a deal with Hercules to give up his own immortality in order to be released from his pain. So this is how the Chiron archetype says we have to let go of something. We have to let go of the wound. We have to let go of the story around the wound. Sometimes we let go, including up to death, to be released from our pain, to be released from the wound. And it also then has us needing to bring the wound into the light, to illuminate it so that we can become conscious of what it is and make the effort to heal it. And then as we heal what we consider to be wounded within our soul, and the wounds can be physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual. Went into a lot more detail of this in part 1 with the archetypes, so I refer you back to that. This is just a quick recap. But as we heal what is wounded into us, then it becomes a gift or a talent that we can then become a healer of or a healer with. And again, since Chiron was discovered in 1977, it was well known that a lot of your alternative healing became more popular and even accepted into mainstream again. Just think of, I remember being, growing up on a farm, oldest of 3 girls. I did a lot of farm work. I did a lot of heavy chore work. And I remember being in high school in the mid 70s. I graduated in 75 from high school. So this was kind of before Chiron was discovered. And I remember getting into this raging, screaming match with my father because I wanted to go to the chiropractor for my sore back, and he absolutely refused to let me go. I never did get to go to the chiropractor. Blah, 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 blah. How, dare you, blah, blah. And, as time went by, now chiropractors are accepted into mainstream massage. My husband has a very, very good friend, an old high school buddy who's a chiropractor, and we are blessed with free chiropractic care. I don't need it as much as Leroy does, but I love it. So you get the example of how those alternative healing arts have become more and more mainstream with Chiron. I think we'll see a new cycle of it even more as Chiron moves into Aries and starts a new healing cycle all of its own, bringing it into consciousness for us. Now, Chiron retrograde cycles, as we also spoke in the first part, Chiron goes retrograde once a year for 5 months. I think it's 156 days, about 43% of the time. So as we have Chiron in Aries for approximately 8 years, we are going to have approximately 8 or 9. Yeah, it dips back into Pisces, but it also dips back into Aries when it goes into Taurus. So we'll have 8 or 9 retrograde cycles where Chiron is in Aries part of the time. We'll have 7 or 8 cycles completely in Aries. And of course, any planetary retrograde will point to the polarity sign of which it's transiting. So Chiron in Aries is going to point to Libra. And one of the biggest things this is going to bring up is the healing art of being able to listen. EA calls Libra that psychology of listening. So when Chiron's retrograde, it's going to behoove us to make the effort to listen so we can observe the other individually or collectively. Countries can listen to each other, and we can observe someone from their perspective of where they're coming from. And of course, Chiron retrograde, we're going to ask others to be listening to us so they can actually perceive where we're coming from. And then this allows that famous Libra giving and receiving as someone actually wishes to receive versus wanting to project onto them. And I'm going to buy you yellow roses because I like yellow roses, rather than saying, what color of roses do you actually like? It will also give us the opportunity to improve upon honest communications. Aries self, Libra others, that psychology of listening. Whenever Chiron's retrograde all the way through Aries, it's going to emphasize communications. And one of the most, beautiful things we can do is to be honest and direct with them. And require that we learn how to be as open as possible to what others want to say to us. That Libra polarity, the other in our life, individually, collectively, will have no problem wanting to speak up and give us their opinions and their feedback. And if they're being as honest as possible with us, can you listen? Doesn't necessarily mean you have to agree, but can you relax that Aries defensiveness and aggressiveness and actually hear and listen? And then, of course, it's also going to have us searching for fairness and balance in any situation, individually and collectively. And as we're striving to have that fairness or equality in a situation or in a relationship, it's an opportunity to review where we want to take action. Chiron and Aries, you know, you're going to hear this term, you know, the spiritual warrior, the, you know, the Aries is initiation. And yet when it's retrograde in Aries, Chiron has to review how it wants to take action. It has to review where it wants to heal and how it wants to heal. It will also have us reviewing where relationships are unequal. And in Libra, that inequality will create one who dominates in a relationship and one who allows themselves to be dominated. That's going to come up because Chiron and Aries, we're all going to want our way in relationships. So when it's retrograde, it's to review that and try and get that inequality or, you know, giving and receiving in a relationship to be more fair and equal in some way. Chiron retrograde in Aries will also require a willingness to ask for help when we need it, wherever we are wounded. You know, this can be a real tough one for Chiron and Aries because, you know, I'll do it myself. How many of you have, you know, seen the little 2-year-olds who are, no, I'll do it, I do it. And so as we're adults, how well can you ask for help when you need it? Yes, you can take it to the extreme of wanting everybody to do everything for you while you do nothing for yourself. Then the universe will somehow, some way say, no, sorry, your responsibility. But there will be that energy from time to time throughout the next 8 years where you're going to need help. You're going to have something that needs to be healed that you can't do. You know, I'm a practitioner in deep memory processing, Roger Wolger's past life regression method. And there is a cliche, and Patricia Walsh, who took over his work in the U.S. when he passed, I can't say it like she does, but paraphrasing, what is wounded in us on an unconscious level needs a healer to help facilitate the healing of it. In other words, it takes a lot longer to heal our own unconscious wounds by ourselves than when we have, for instance, the methodology of deep memory processing. It requires a facilitator and a client and someone holding the consciousness for you to heal physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. It goes much faster when you have that healer facilitating. You do the work, but again, this is part of that human relationship stuff that we have. And so when Chiron's retrograde in Aries, it's going to be a time period to throw off all the old wounding and traumas. So how can you make an effort to do that? How can you help someone else who asks for help when Chiron's retrograde? I told you before what actions to take, but Chiron and Aries, because we're all going to be initiating new healing efforts. When it's retrograde, take a little review on what you do want to initiate in your life. Direct, go forward with those initiations. Retrograde, take a little review, and it'll be a back and forth, two steps forward, one step backward. You know what I'm saying. I do feel that Chiron in Aries is going to initiate a cycle worldwide in which we review and slowly but surely make progress with healthcare. You know, we say universal healthcare in terms of a country, What about when we get to universal health care in terms of the whole planet? I don't know. I mean, wouldn't it be beautiful over the next 50 years if we could actually do that in this next Chironic cycle? And so every time Chiron's retrograde, you can, see healthcare come up in the news about it. And how do we change healthcare? In the United States, how do we deal with the outrageousness of our drug pricing? Watch Chiron and Aries and various states try to, make changes in that regard, because it's typically the states leading the feds in the United States anyway. I already said, I think alternative healing is going to have a whole nother cycle in the picture. It's going to come into that traditional allopathic world even more. Whenever Chiron's retrograde, there can be a setback, but when Chiron's retrograde, we can also see something all of a sudden come into the picture, and everybody goes, wait a minute, why are we doing this? I mean, just look at how many people are, use natural supplements and vitamins. Now, of course, when Chiron is retrograde in Aries, the distortions are going to be around the archetypes of Aries, the anger and the rage and the aggression, because Aries does not like to be contained in any way. It is the first archetype. It wants freedom to act in any and all directions. And so any planet retrograde in Aries gets frustrated. And Chiron retrograde in Aries can intensify whatever's there as a wound, conscious or unconscious. And so whenever it's retrograde, we might see another outburst of what you could call the lone terrorist, because they don't know how to heal their wound. They're frustrated in the wound, and so they act out. You can see this in one-on-one intimate relationships. Not that it doesn't go on every day of the week, but we may see some, some types of ebb and flows as this comes through with every retrograde cycle. So maybe every retrograde cycle we can make some steps forward in the United States on the whole gun control conversation. Of course, Chiron is going to retrograde back into Pisces here one time. I think, what was my dates here? Hold on a second. It retrogrades back into Pisces September 25th through February 18th. I had this slide from a prior Chiron retrograde class, so I'm just going to put this up on the screen for you visually. I will say, as Chiron retrogrades back into Pisces one more time, you want to make every effort possible to heal any spiritual wounding, so that you can have that reconnection to source however necessary. And as we talked in part 1, archetypes, it's that reconnection on an energetic spiritual level that'll then create that miraculous healing down into the mental, emotional, and physical bodies to allow you, to create your own miracle with some type of physical healing. Of course, on your screen is a few examples on the collective level. So again, how could I heal myself, Source? What do I need to know, Source? How do I connect with you, Source, to heal myself as deeply as possible on a spiritual level? How do I feel connected to you completely, totally, unconditionally? Now, Chiron, as you saw visually, has with that eccentric orbit, it's impossible to put up slides that say, here's where you'll have your square, here's where you'll have your opposition. I played with charts over the last couple of days, and I thought, we all have our Chiron return about 51 years because it goes around that circle. So that's the only real constant that we have. But I thought, well, maybe the oppositions all come around 25. Oh no, they were all over the place between, 19, 20 years old all the way up to 35 years old. They were all over. Your first Chiron square can happen between 5 and 23 years old. That's going to be a very wide range to have Chiron first quarter square itself. So what happens with these first last quarter squares oppositions? It's very individualistic, and how each of us will address lessons for self-healing wounds, whatever it is that comes into consciousness. So a 7-year-old going through the Chiron first square is going to have lessons that are much different than someone who has a first Chiron square at 21 years old. You literally have to look at the individual chart, and of course then use the cycle of phases and aspects, archetypes, first quarter crises in action, last quarter crises in consciousness, and relate them to the signs in the houses, and then just relate it to the logicalness of the age of the person at which this is happening. Now, one thing that Barbara Hanclough had said was that when grandparents have grandchildren that are born approximately 50 years apart, they're going to have a similar Chiron cycle. And it doesn't matter whether the signs are speeding through fast or speeding slow. If you have that skipped generation between grandparents and grandchildren, and they have a similar Chiron cycle, there's a sympathetic energy. What do they call it? Simpatico. I think it's the word. There's a synergistic energy that will come for them. And she said, maybe this is one of those possibilities why, again, you don't have the day-to-day stuff of raising the child that the parent does, but you've also got this Chiron, synchronicity that is going on when grandparents and grandchildren are, within a similar Chiron cycle. And I just thought, this isn't everybody. I have parents who had a grandchild in their early to mid 70s. So obviously that cycle's not going to be lining up, but it could be more common than not to have that approximately 51 year, difference between grandparents and grandchildren. As we go through part 2 and Chiron and Aries transiting through the 12 houses, and we'll have hopefully 12 chart examples. We'll look to see, where do we have a square? Where do we have an opposition going on? And future slides with inner planets, I'll cover some of these even archetypes with the cycles. We'll cover some of that in specific example as we move through the next, the second part of the series. Chiron returns. You will know if you have Chiron in Aries, but if you were born between 1968 to 1977, that's the general time frame. You're going to have a Chiron return over the next 7-8 years. And of course, it's going to emphasize everything we went over in part 1 in the archetypes and what's going to be healing. It's basically a culmination of being able to review and understand where you're wounded, where you had trauma. And the Chiron return is just going to be like a light bulb, bringing your wounds into consciousness. And so you get that, extra special effort And I'd give it about a 3-year time frame. You know, chances are with Aries, because it takes so long through the sign, you're going to have a retrograde with 3 passages. You could even have 5 passages of Chiron. When Chiron's moving through Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, and Taurus, it can set up 2 retrograde cycles with 5 aspects. So you might have 3 Chiron returns, you might have 5. That's, you know, a lot of efforts to really heal, break free, and be able to move beyond the wound. And of course, what else? The wounded healer. It's your time period. It's your calling to step up to the plate as a healer. It doesn't mean you have to go out there and, you know, necessarily get your Reiki or massage, you know, degrees, or, you know, set up shop as a tarot reader or astrologer. By all means, you most surely can. But it also will be there. You're going to step up to the plate as a healer one way or another, or you're going to start through that second Chiron cycle and become even more wounded. You know, there's even, you know, I had a friend, the biological mother of, you know, our son, Leroy's son. She left planet Earth between 50 and 51 years of age. And sometimes, you know, and it wasn't that she wasn't trying to heal. She was. But sometimes it is just literally letting go of the wound through leaving the body. But regardless, those of us who move past the Chiron return, you're going to heal either directly or indirectly, some way, some fashion. It can be as simple as just being aware of wounding collectively and energizing it on a conscious level for planet Earth. But these are going to be the 3 things. Review, really work with your own wounds, heal, break free, and how do I step up to the plate as the healer? So, of course, you know, spiritual warrior, that's a term that just comes with Aries in general. But I really like this term for Chiron because of, you know, warriors, spiritual warriors. And from my perspective, we want to heal. We're standing up for justice. We're standing up for helping others. We're standing up for everyone having freedom. We're standing up for everyone to be safe in their world. So, you know, yes, here's your chance to be the spiritual warrior, initiate changes in your life. This will be, you're going to have renewal of your desires. You're going to have new desires coming in. And it's going to be about acting upon things in your life. Rebirth your relationship with yourself, the Libra polarity, others. And of course, you may be asked to step into some type of leadership role within your family, within your community, you know, within your country, within your friendship groups. You can be all over the place in how you choose to do that. All right. Happy Chiron return to any of you who are going to have your Chiron returns. Hopefully we'll have a chart example with the Chiron return. I haven't looked at the charts yet. I've been too busy just trying to match up 12 houses by transits. So Barbara Hand Clow would say that Chiron always brings an alchemizing energy to whatever the evolution is of any planet. And this is true with planetary aspects as well. This happens when transiting Chiron, progressed in solar arc Chiron, make aspects to natal planets. And it happens when transiting, progressed, and solar arc planets, forecasting planets, aspect natal Chiron. Okay, so it works both ways. And again, we'll use actual chart examples in part 2. So, of course, anytime you're going to have a Chiron forecasting aspect or a forecasting planet making an aspect to natal Chiron, it's opportunities to self-heal. So you'll just look at the planet that's involved. If it's Chiron in the moon, we're going to be healing emotions. If it's Chiron in Mercury, we're going to be healing communications, maybe finding our voice in some way, or learning to listen or process information differently in some way. You will just go through whichever planet or planets it is. So Chiron will be working, of course, to make planets more conscious, so that whatever is wounded or distorted about that planetary archetype can be brought into the light and healed, addressed, become something, that we can work with for ourselves and others in a more positive way. So these are simple words on this screen. However, the application could be as varied as any aspect you can think of between Chiron and any other planet. As I said, we'll have specific examples with actual chart applications as we move forward. What I'm going to do next, though, is work with how Chiron is interacting with some of these slower moving planets that we have out there. And of course, for me, I like to work from the broadest cycles into the faster cycles. So we're going to start with Aries. And I'm going to take a drink for a moment. I do not consider myself to be an expert on Aries, but I'm aware that it's in Aries. It has a 558-year eccentric orbit around the sun. It's just as eccentric as Chiron is. I didn't go into any research about how short or wide it is in various signs of the zodiac. And I'm wondering if I have this one correct. I gotta double check this. I think I do. I think I looked this one. I was trying to see how Aries went into Aries 1922, and it spent 1922 to 1928, I think it is. Aries back to Pisces, Aries back to Pisces, Aries back to Pisces. And I might be wrong with my math here. I think the 5 is wrong. I've got a 2580 up here. I think that part might be wrong. I might have went through and did a Chiron cycle, and I'm going to do my math here. Excuse my Virgo. Yeah, I did a Chiron or an Aries cycle. Okay, I'll look this number up and correct it and tell you how long it's going to be in Aries, because if it's at 25 degrees, coming up next decade, it's about 23, 24 degrees right now, and it varies with its retrograde cycle. It varies, I think, 3-4 degrees. Point is, Chiron, before it finishes up in Aries, is going to meet Eris. Here's your dates. Here's your degrees. And Aries in Greek mythology was the goddess of discord and strife. Now, that's not the only archetypes to Aries. However, you can see by its distortions, its distortions with the archetype, it can obviously have something to do with wars, violence, anger, fighting, all of the let me stir the pot and make things worse. However, then, we can also deduce from that or observe from that what's the opposite of war? Peace. What's the opposite of stirring things up? Learning how to get along, hold hands. And so interesting that we discovered Aries while it was in Aries. And yet, as I've pondered it in my last few years, again, spiritual warrior. The opposite of another opposite of war is justice, social justice. Having equality with issues. And so it's possible as Chiron catches up to Aries and connects with it, with these three conjunctions, that we may see this whole issue of war versus peace come to a head. Remember, in 2020, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto are all going to meet in Capricorn. And so astrologers are all, pondering, how much more war before we say enough? And, the politicians in the last week who are just going, thank you to these children in Florida who are standing up, and the children all across the United States who are starting to stand up with them, and the adults who are standing behind them and going, I got your back, thank you for this. And it's going to be some pretty interesting conversations the rest of this decade and going into the next decade. It remains to be seen how it unfolds, whether we create more war and violence, whether we move into World War III and nuclear war, or whether enough of us say enough is enough and let's go for peace. Now, I think it will take these issues of male and female equality, and it's going to bring them to a head in some way and initiate them moving forward if we've not addressed it already. I thought about that and I go, I gotta wait 10 more years in the United States for women to receive the same amount of the same hourly rate as man to do the same job. I hope it doesn't take that long, but we'll see where the issues are as we get closer, because, this is 8 years away here. I do think that, again, we're going to see patriarchal distortions made more and more conscious through Chiron's transit in Aries. We've seen it to some degrees with its transit through Pisces. We've succumbed to it some more through Chiron's transit through Pisces. And now as Chiron gets ready to go into Aries, I just think it's going to be no, and it'll pop into consciousness more. And so these patriarchal distortions are meant to be dissolved at the end of the Piscean age. And hopefully these two might give us, some real social justice in this regard. Stay tuned. Look where this will be in your chart on planet Earth at some point in the next decade. Healers are spiritual warriors who have found the courage to defeat the darkness of their souls. Awakening and rising from the depth of their deepest fears, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, reborn with wisdom and strength that creates a light that shines bright enough to help encourage and inspire others out of their own darkness. So Chiron cycle with Aries, because Aries is so far from the sun, is going to pretty much match up to Chiron cycle. I didn't research this to see how often, but I'm taking a guess here that Chiron will run into Aries about every 50-51 years as it moves through the zodiac. However, as we said before, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Chiron cycles with these planets are very highly variable. Just trying to do a little bit of research. With Jupiter, I got 13 to 19 years. With Saturn, I got anywhere from 55 to 72 years. Uranus, the current cycle, is 145 years. Neptune and Pluto are in that 60, 70 year variability. And there's no average. It just varies widely. So again, it's not anything that you can just put up statistically in a PowerPoint slide. It just totally depends on where Chiron's moving, slow sign, fast sign, and where these planets are moving. And so because those cycles vary, same thing, squares and oppositions, trines between Chiron and these other planets will vary widely as well. And as you see here going forward, even a specific aspect can happen 3 times or 41 times. It's just something that you're just going to have to observe with an ephemeris and then make it relevant to each individual chart you're working with. Chiron cycle with the inner planets is going to be pretty much annually, because the inner planets, and here I'm talking, Mercury Sun, Mercury, Venus will be annual, Moon will be lunar, monthly, and Mars will be biannual, okay, because its cycle around the sun is every 2 years. They're so close to the sun that whatever their cycle with the sun is, that's what their cycle will be with Chiron. Make sense? Questions, you can just type it into I think it's called the Q&A area. Leroy will address it, or he will interrupt me. Then if you do have questions, you're welcome to interrupt. I don't mind at all. Again, with Chiron's eccentric orbit, spending 3/5 of the cycle, or 30 of its 51 years in 4 signs, it can create some real interesting multiple aspects with the planets. And Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, I've got them listed here. We're going to go through these individually and just look at these in a little bit more detail so you can get some perspective on how Chiron is operating with each of the inner planets, and that includes Jupiter too. So almost everyone who was born between 1952 through 2006 has Chiron opposing Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto. And some souls have Chiron opposing more than one of these planets. Those of you born in the mid-60s, have Chiron opposing Uranus and Pluto. And of course, it just, it varies. But point is, there's a lot of souls alive on the planet with Chiron oppositions. And so to me, it just represents how on an individual and a collective basis, there's evolutionary potential to make all kinds of these patriarchal distortions again more and more conscious. It varies widely amongst astrologers on what you want to give as a date for the ending of the Piscean age or the beginning of the Aquarian age. In Jeffrey's early teachings, when Jeffrey Green and Stephen Forrest were known as the Pluto brothers, oh God, what was the name of the books? Part 1 and Part 2. I've got the books. They'll pop into my mind which of these, the name of these two books. If somebody remembers, type it in. Anyway, in those two books came from a workshop they did together, and at the end of those books, they put in their opinion on the dates. And it came from, I want to say, the research of an astrologer named Mark Robertson. And so they went through a 26,000 year cycle, and they did the great ages, the age of Aries, the age of Pisces, and they did the sub ages, and they ended up dividing, those ages into 84 Uranus cycles. Point is, their opinion, they put the ending of the Piscean age and the beginning of the Aquarian age at 2060. So if you look at that opinion, we're not quite there yet. Regardless, it's going to be several 100-year transitions, leaving one and moving into the other. And anytime you have planets going through Pisces, they're going to help intensify the ending of the Piscean age. I feel, regardless of the sign, Chiron opposing, Chiron the wounds, and making things conscious to heal. Well, what's more wounded than all of these distortions from the patriarchy over the last 2,000 to 8,000 years? So there's a lot of people right now that can have the potential to be questioning and objectifying things. Oppositions in general are objectivity. You have two things opposing itself. It's the harmonics of two, or dividing the circle in half. And when two things are on opposite sides of the circle, opposite opinions, okay, opposite awareness, it's the potential to have the greatest objectivity. And so perhaps with Chiron having so many, perhaps with so many souls alive right now, having Chiron oppositions with outer planets taking place, it might represent some slow, step-by-step humanitarian evolution. For me personally, it's pretty fluffing ridiculous that we can't feed, clothe, and shelter every single human being on planet Earth. We have the resources to do it. So the birthing of the Aquarian age is going to be, becoming a worldwide citizen. It's going to be globalization. And we better frickin' learn how to get along with ourselves, because the Aquarian age is going to bring in those from other solar systems, the other beings from other galaxies, and our fighting with each other will look pretty ridiculous. And I'm preaching to the choir, sorry. So it also then, with these Chiron oppositions, as it gives us some personal objectivity, it will help us with some collective objectivity as well. You can't be alive on planet Earth without having been through a few lifetimes during the last 2,000 years of the Piscean age. You've had some human-made conditionings with patriarchal distortions. So these Chiron oppositions represent you learning personal objectivity. That's then going to help planet Earth, hopefully, with some collective objectivity. So Chiron Pluto. I put down the last couple of conjunctions. Again, don't take this cycle alone as, being the average number of years, but here's the last conjunction. There was one in the end of 1999. Hey, that was Y2K, wasn't it? Remember? None of our computers were going to work. The world was going to fall apart. 11.5 degrees Sag. And, that conjunction between the two in Sag, an intent to rediscover and return to natural spiritual laws and principles, shamanism on individual and collective levels. Chiron Pluto as a planetary pair, it's the soul's ability to make karmic wounds conscious, self-heal them, and turn them into the talents and gifts. Ta-da! We also, though, in the distortions of it, can fall into the fundamentalist, dogmatic religious side of things. My God's better than your God. We can get pretty self-righteous and not even recognize how much we wound someone else. The closest aspects that we have to Chiron is Chiron will make first quarter squares to Pluto, but it will not do it until 10 years from now. There will be 5 of those waxing squares, 2028 to 30 in Taurus and Aquarius. Now, Chiron is going to be super active in the year 2028. You can just, I don't have a slide recapping it, but you'll see it in various slides. It'll not only have aspects with Pluto, it'll have aspects with Neptune as well. And so you can see that we're still just through the beginning of a Chiron Pluto cycle here that we've just started, because we won't have conjunctions again until Chiron makes a complete cycle through the zodiac, comes back to Aries again. So remember, and part of the, when two planets have conjunctions to each other, they lay seed thoughts of their intent. And of course, this is their intent here. Okay. And so we will be working with this potential to return to natural spiritual laws all through this current Chiron Pluto cycle. However, let's back up to that last cycle here. This one that started in 1941 that was still an intent in Sag, okay? In the middle of this cycle right here, here's one of those oppositions I talked about. 1961-65, Chiron opposed Pluto 11 times. Between 5 and 19 degrees, Chiron Pisces, Pluto Virgo. These are souls that are now 53 to 57 years old in 2018, okay? These years old, as I start to do those, I start to utilize that. We're time stamping it to the timing of this slideshow. During that time period, not all of it, Saturn went into Pisces and made conjunctions to Chiron. And, here was an intent to here was the conscious ability to lift the veil on anything that was unconscious. The potential to ground our psychic awareness. When you have Saturn in Pisces, it's throwing the lid off of our individuated consciousness, and it's just making everything, conscious, aware. And that's that veil between what we're aware of and what we're not aware of, conscious, unconscious. And, these two were just tearing it to the smithereens back then. And these souls were born with this happening throughout their lives. They were born with various degrees and abilities to do that. You know, Saturn in Pisces is the most, you know, psychic of all the Saturn archetypes. And of course, what was the potential here? To just really reawaken the shamanism and the healer. Now, Uranus was hanging out with Pluto, of course. Many of us know that they had 3 conjunctions in 65 in mid Virgo. And of course, this intent is to liberate from all those old patriarchal conditionings, religious distortions, Pluto and Virgo, polarity Pisces, to rebirth into natural spirituality, healing talents. I like to say the Pluto and Virgo generation, for the most part, came here to experience their disappointment, disintegration of organized religion, and in general, with a Pisces polarity point, they came here to rebirth their belief systems. The Pluto and Virgo generation came here to shift from religious dogma or patriarchal wounding into natural, more and more natural spirituality. It doesn't mean they can't become born again Christians in consensus. Yes, they can. But you can see what was going on here. It wasn't just Chiron opposed to Pluto. You can throw in Saturn and Uranus for a lot of these oppositions that were taking place. So look at, you know, that mini generation here, and this 1965 babies. You guys have, you know, I can't remember what it is, North Node Sag, South Node Gemini, or vice versa. You know, you could have all these planets square the nodes as well. The 1965 babies, I think they all do. And it creates for some interesting chart reads, which means there's a lot of confusion and woundedness about what's right and what's wrong, and a lot of guilt issues, most of it conditioned guilt. So a lot of things, but Chiron opposing Pluto here. Point is, you know, these souls have a lot of awakening to do in regards to how they can heal themselves. And they got some help from Saturn and Uranus, quite frankly. And so, thank you is the way to look at it. Not, oh my gosh, really? I had to be born with this? No, thank you. You know, I've watched some of these souls as clients really make efforts in their life. I can think of one person in particular, and I won't mention the name, but you know her, Leroy, a friend of Diana's, or her son's mom. And she went from being born into the most strict religious household with abuse into healing it and really kind of taking charge of her own life and just completely going forward with metaphysics. I mean, one end to the other, the pendulum swing. That's Chironic healing. Chiron and Neptune. Here are the last 2 conjunctions, okay? Libra, and of course, this most recent one in 2010 in Aquarius, and we talked about this in our first part when we had the Jupiter, Chiron, Neptune conjunctions in 2010, 2009, 2010, I think it was 24 to 26 degrees Aquarius. And of course, Chiron, Neptune is going to be the evolution of spiritual alchemy and awakening. It's going to be opening up to the shaman, the mystic, the healer, all of these metaphysical alternative healing arts we talk about. I mean, Chiron and Neptune, how may we dance with each other? Now, with their last conjunction in Aquarius, we talked last night, quantum physics. Energy flows where attention goes. You cannot destroy energy. Energy and matter just exchange forms, particle in the wave, and of course, sparking the transition into the Aquarian age. Now, what can happen is the distortions of this is the wounds that don't heal. All of the distorted Neptunian words, you know, neglect, escapism, substance abuses, you know, and something to recognize on a broader level with Neptune is abuse can be physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. We'll look at drug abuse or alcohol abuse. We'll look at food abuse. We'll look at physical abuses with Neptune. But don't forget the emotional ones. Neptune is a water sign, and mental and spiritual. As we talked in that first part, you know, you don't separate those four elements, those four levels of manifestation. And so again, Chiron and Neptune can distort it into the extremes. You know, the extreme would be someone who is so confused, so wounded, so out of an egoic grounding that, you know, they're the one that the separating forces come in and embody. You know, what do you call it? You know, when you do the exorcism because you have, you know, the separating energies trying to take over your consciousness, that would be the extremes of distortion between these two planets. There is nobody home. Now, here's 28 again. Chiron will make 5 waxing semi-sextiles to Neptune, 2028-30, 7 degrees to 12 degrees Taurus and Aries. It's beginning to pull away from the conjunction, and this will be the first aspect it makes in pulling away from that 2010 conjunction. Now, backing up though, between this last cycle right here, we had, and it's not that Chiron and the outer planets didn't make other aspects, but the oppositions just stuck out at me. You know, it's the most tense of the aspects that you make. It's the halfway point of any cycle. So didn't have very many, but in 1989 to 1990, Chiron opposed Neptune 3 times. Did it between 10 to 14 degrees, Chiron in Cancer and Neptune in Capricorn. So these are some souls on the planet right now that are 18 to 19 years old. And this includes some of the souls who could still possibly be in high school in this Parkland, Florida shooting. And, you know, it happened last week on Valentine's Day, and the Parkland shooter was in the news as a 19-year-old. So quite possible he has this Chiron-Neptune opposition. And so as we talked in the previous slide, you know, here's the woundedness. Here's the, you know, lack of any type of spiritual healing, wholeness, morality, support. You know, he was angry at the girlfriend for cheating on him and breaking up with him and going on to a new boyfriend. I don't know if her or that new boyfriend were one of the two killed. I don't know. But obviously this is woundedness around self-love. And he was also in the news for losing both parents. Father died several years ago. The mother died 3 months ago in November. So we had a lost soul. Now, these souls, because of these oppositions in Cancer, Capricorn, they're learning to recognize gender inequalities. They're searching for gender equality within themselves and with others. Some of the broadest intents here would be to the ability to recognize the inner animus, Cancer Capricorn, regardless of whatever gender they come into, because as we expand in consciousness, as we evolve spiritually and go through buku lifetimes of incarnations, you know, your avatars are the ones that hold that animus, their, you know, male and female within themselves. You know, the most famous example, of course, is a modern avatar, Yogananda. When you look at pictures of him, is he male or female? And, you know, they are also, you know, this little mini generation here, don't discount them. There will be a few of them who are going to make it in the consensus world on the broad stage that will expose distortions of gender roles. You know, who says men can't sew clothing, or women can't change oil in vehicles? You know, Jeffrey's Betty Crocker Marble Man, you know, examples that he used to give. There'll be a few of these that just break out and help, you know, expose all of this for us here on planet Earth. Be at peace with your own soul. Then heaven and earth will be at peace with you. And that quote is by Saint, I'm not going to pronounce, Isaac of Nineveh. Thank you for bearing with all my Sag right brain pronunciations. I'm going to take another drink here, okay? Chiron and Uranus. Okay. Their last conjunction was back in 1898. Another Sag conjunction going on here. This is where I just see, you know, as I tried to look a few cycles, I just found Chiron and Uranus all over the place, but they were long cycles. I think they're somewhere, and I could be entirely wrong, but, you know, 140, 145 years. That's basically what this one is. They won't have conjunctions until 2042, 43 in Leo. So very, very long and erratic cycle together. This is the ability to self-heal unconscious traumas and wounds. Remember I said, while in the long scheme of things, we are the only one who heals ourselves. It's sure helpful to have a healer facilitate. It's sure helpful, you know, to have friends to talk to and give you objectivity and hold space and all of that good stuff. But the point is, you're the individuated unconsciousness where most of trauma resides, where most of the wounding resides. These two together are working to make it conscious, making us aware of things in order to heal. And of course, just like with Pluto, to have that conjunction in Sagittarius, there's an intent to also return to what we know as natural law, or to, you know, awaken the shaman, the healer within us. Now, the interesting thing about Chiron and Uranus is that there were 41 oppositions between 1952 to 1989. That is a whole heck of a lot of oppositions. During that time period, Chiron went from 10 Capricorn to 5 Cancer, Uranus went from 10 Cancer to 5 Capricorn. So here's the oppositions that came through. Souls from basically 50 to 66 years of age. It skipped a little. That's how erratic it is. And then we have these 29 to 33-year-olds. I went and did a little research, and there are approximately 2.5 billion people with natal Chiron opposed natal Uranus. That is either a lot of distorted shock and trauma and re-imprinting of wounds, or it is a lot of potential to just wake up and break free. So I broke down the years for you. Many of you on this phone call, I'm in the Aquarius Leo generation. No, wait a minute. Yes, yeah. I was actually born in 57, and they didn't have an exact opposition then, but my opposition was only 1 degree off. And so you can just, and I guess there's a little mini skip here between, 54 and 62, but I ran some random dates and I would still find a lot of the oppositions just still within orbit of each other. So I'll let you, you've got these dates to work with to see the mini generations of everything going on. Look at how this time period right in here. Remember last time Chiron was in Aries, 1968 to 1977. Yeah, look at that, 13 Uranus Libra opposition. Yeah, that went on as well. So again, these individuals range from 29 to 66 years old. It's a lot of people. Patriarchal distortions are probably pretty deeply ingrained from past lives in these souls. They're ingrained on a broad basis amongst almost all souls on a collective unconsciousness. And what happens is, Jeffrey Green used to say, we've had patriarchal distortions on the planet for so long, we don't even recognize the distortions anymore. We can't even recognize what's unnatural anymore. Sometimes even in EA's spirituated state of consciousness, approximately 1 out of 10 souls, we're conditioned. And it might take some real reflection or psychic or physical 2x4s to go, wait a minute, that's not natural, that's not right. I mean, that's what we're all in the process of doing. So these souls are coming in with trauma. The 2 planets, wounding and trauma, if you want to reduce Chiron Uranus down to 2 words. So they're coming in with it, but they've got some major opportunities to be able to recognize it. These are the souls, the earliest ones, were these the I'm thinking of the Vietnam War. So yes, these might be some of the souls. I could go back and check this. The 52 to 68. No, it was those born in the 40s that ended up in fighting in the Vietnam War. They came back with PTSD, but we didn't quite call it that yet. But as we've come through the Vietnam War, and as we've now in the U.S., and thank you for bearing with me, international listeners, as we've come through these, Afghanistan and Iraq wars, this is, pretty common. And now we're even able to recognize that PTSD doesn't just come with war, come through the school shooting. It comes with the trauma of being born into fighting parents. So we're recognizing it more and more and more that these souls born, and these souls in these age groups, they're all adults now, and the youngest ones are going through a Saturn return. They're so recognizing this. And again, potential, make it conscious in order to heal. Now, there will be those who are not, and they're creating more trauma. How we move forward in any country or culture is going to depend upon our ability to recognize this, to recognize the trauma and the PTSD, and to make some efforts to actually address it. But I'll tell you what, 2.5 million souls, adults alive, that's a lot of energy to perhaps try and address it at the ending of the Piscean age. And just by nature of this opposition, Chiron moves into Aries. It's going to want to initiate new cycles of being able to heal all this. And yes, there will be those lone rangers or groups that Chiron and Aries go off the deep end. They'll serve as that learn by contrast example to help us, help these souls all learn this, awaken to this, and potentially move forward from it. Now, here's the other thing going on as well. Remember, I said that, I'll back up for you. Remember, we said their next conjunctions are going to be 2042, 43 in mid-Leo. If you've been listening to my podcast, you listen to me talk about the waning semi-sextiles between Chiron and Uranus. Between 2009 and 1980. Oh, I got that backwards. Sorry. No, that's not right. That 2021. Here it is, right here. Okay, I'm going to have to change that figure. Hold on. My Virgo has to make a note here. I don't know where that came from. Between 2009 and 2021, Chiron will make 26 waning semi-sextiles to Uranus. That's the balsamic phase. It's 30 degrees from Uranus. Catching up, catching up, catching up. Oh, I forgot to change this right here. This is wrong too. I must have skipped and took a break and went to a different slide and forgot to come back to it. I'll correct that. The waning semi-sextiles, it's correct right here. Okay. Late Aquarius, Pisces, Pisces, Aries. Of course, this is what we're in the middle of right now. And then it'll continue on into Aries, Taurus before it then leaves that aspect and then creeps to the conjunctions in 2042. Just like we said in the previous slides, we can have some re-imprinting of the old wounds, individually, collectively, or perhaps make the traumas conscious in order to heal and collectively heal all the Piscean age wounding. Of course, the intent, and as I said, balsamic phase, 30 degrees away, one of the intents of these aspects is going to be recognizing the ultimate healer, universal source, and as Uranus moves into Taurus, recognizing the ultimate resource, universal source. And so play with these aspects, you know, in your chart. It's, you know, you won't even see this aspect in your astrological calendars. And I'm an advocate for taking the outer planets, and whether you do Chiron through Pluto or you do Saturn through Pluto, I think we should include the semi-sextiles, the semi-squares, the sesqui-squadrates, the inconjuncts. You know, they're not included. And look at, we got 26 frickin' semi-sextiles going on. Surrender, Chiron surrender to Uranus. And yet how are we going to break free and liberate from the trauma and the wounding? Every time we have one of these semi-sextiles going on, it's an opportunity to heal. Saturn, Chiron. There was one conjunction back in 1966. Remember, Saturn hanging out with Chiron while we had oppositions to Uranus, Pluto. One conjunction, 24 degrees Pisces. I left these in here. Remember 2016, 17, when Saturn was making a T-square to the Jupiter and Virgo oppositions to Chiron and Neptune in Pisces. We called it the spiritual T-square, and all about include or exclude, and made a few baby steps forward in that direction. Here's another one of those 2028 things. When Chiron's making those aspects to Neptune and Pluto, Saturn will make its next conjunction to Chiron. So Saturn, Chiron, expanding individual consciousness, expanding that maturation process. And to the degree we heal our wounding, we have that potential to more fully participate in society. Last conjunction in Pisces, okay? Expanding consciousness to self-heal, blah, 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 blah. Metamorphosing our physical limitations. You know, this is one to look at. You can look in your own chart and see where your Saturn Chiron lies. Okay. I'll show you'll know if you know if you have a Saturn Chiron opposition, but regardless, look at your phasal relationship between Saturn and Chiron. And then study that phase and see how are you trying to move beyond the limitations of your physical wounds and your physical illnesses. Chiron is helping Saturn with that. That's their intent together. Now, as we have Saturn or Chiron go into trying to look ahead for you. Nope, I don't have any recent aspects. It's going to be a little bit before Chiron or Saturn actually makes aspects to Chiron as it's coming off of these first quarter squares. I mean, you could get into the minor aspects of the biseptile at 102. Then you will look at the a couple of the 120 trine, the 135 first quarter to give us phase. Those are what's going to be coming down the road between Saturn and Chiron. But I don't think there was any aspects with Chiron and Aries specifically to Saturn. I'll double check that for you and just make sure on that one, okay? However, in this last cycle that started in 1966, remember, to 1928, from 1986 to 2006, Saturn opposed Chiron 27 times. So look at that. 1966, one conjunction in Pisces, and then 1986 to 06, 27 oppositions. Here's your listing: Saturn from Sag to Leo, Chiron from Gemini to Aquarius. Here's the years, here's how many times it happens. I put in the Pluto generations because these right here between 12 to 15, this is Pluto and Sagittarius, and these are the little souls that got most, you know, affected by the school shooting last week. And here's the Pluto and Scorpio generation between that are 23 to 32 years old. Pluto was in Scorpio 1983, 84 to 1995. So we've got two little Pluto generations, young ones coming up that have all of these Saturn Chiron oppositions. It's almost the entire Pluto and Scorpio generation. And then, of course, the beginnings of the Pluto and Sag generations. I did some math. Billion young adults with Saturn Chiron oppositions. Can you just reflect on what we've been saying here over the last week with these young adults standing up to the school shooting in the United States and going, enough is enough? These guys are having to deal with being born with these oppositions and being re-traumatized and going, enough is enough. We're not going to do this anymore. We're going to grow up. We're going to vote. We're going to change things. I've said for years that, you know, as when Pluto went into Libra, and you can even include the Virgos, but when Pluto went into Libra, these youngest three generations, you know, they're other orientated. Libra, Scorpio, Sag, these little philosophers wondering how these adults can be so ignorant. Of course, what can be happening for them, we read this in the news, frustrated with the limitations of the reality of their world and their inability to get ahead. They can be susceptible to depression and anger, but they also have the potential to be much more aware of how our systems work and how they don't work and what needs to change and what needs to evolve. And these souls with a direct Chiron hit to Saturn, their whole subconscious unconsciousness is going to be more conscious. Remember, whatever Chiron hits, it's that rainbow bitch. It's waking it up. It's making it conscious. And so, you know, we've got a little generation of souls. What did I read? Oh, gosh. I want to say the group that they loosely call the millennials, it's these two generations. It's the Pluto and Scorpios and the Pluto and Sagittarius, not year by year, because of course consensus society doesn't go by the Pluto transits, but they match up more than they don't by Pluto's transit through signs. And so these little, you know, millennials, as they grow up, again, we've already got them into adulthood, they're going to learn how to overcome these Saturnian limitations. And they'll make major changes to social structures. And they will step into these leadership and power roles. So even if there's no specific aspects, just by virtue of Chiron going into Aries over the next 8 years, this natal aspect is going to be alchemicized, whatever the word is. They're going to be juiced to initiate. I just have been waiting for these kids to step up to the plate, and you know, I'm just fascinated by, you know, what they're doing. And if the older generations don't listen, Chiron and Aries is just going to spur them to take action. They're going to do it with or without the older adults, I think. But this is again, just because Chiron might not be making an exact aspect, don't think Chiron in Aries isn't doing anything. It's kind of why I've brought up these oppositions in some of these generations, so that you can just see how Chiron in Aries is going to instigate these different age groups and these different natal Chiron outer planet oppositions. And I don't mean to neglect any other Chiron aspects. I don't need to neglect Chiron squares or trines or conjunctions and blah, 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 blah. We'll get into details as we go through various chart examples, okay? We carry the shackles of negative emotional memories through the conditioned sleep we are fed into. We carry them as our burden through life, weighing us down, stopping our flight to waking up and embracing our magnificence as consciousness. With release comes fearless empowerment of being. And of course, you see this is a quote by Edel O'Mahony from Path of the Peaceful Warrior. So here's Jupiter with Chiron. Again, you remember the 3 conjunctions we spoke about before. And here's the aspects that Chiron is in process, or excuse me, Jupiter is in process of making to Chiron. It's just starting to step away from Chiron. And so right now, with Jupiter and Scorpio, it's in process of making the sesquiquadrate, the 135-degree aspect. This is where Jupiter is going from first quarter phase to, boy, okay, get myself straightened out here. Yes, first quarter to gibbous. Yep. In its relationship to Chiron. And so even though sometimes that sign, Scorpio to Pisces, looks like a trine, it's not there yet. It is that uncomfortable square and a half. 1 with Chiron in Pisces, 2 with Chiron in Aries. And so you can look specific to these dates, see where they're happening in your chart. The waxing sesquisquadrate is where, you know, first quarter phase, crises and actions. We've put so much energy into manifesting and healers coming out, healing modalities coming out, that whole quantum energy that I've talked about. You know, the intent is quantum intuitive leaps of growth is what I wrote. It now has to make adjustments in order to relate to the broader world. In other words, that first quarter just can't go bursting out and creating without feedback. And so that gibbous phase starts to give feedback and say, adjust, adjust, adjust. If we make efforts to adjust our healing, our personal self-healing, our healing and helping others, if we make necessary adjustments as our own emotional intuition asks us to, then we can get to this first quarter trine. Yeah, I got this right, don't I? Yeah. I got this, I got something's not right here. My math is, I think maybe it backs up. 120 and back, something's not right here. Oh. No. Okay. I've got something that's not right here and I can't figure it out at the moment. If Leroy can make it help me out, and I don't have my math sheets here. Hold on a second. Oh, duh. Duh. Okay, I got it. It's not a waxing sesquisquadrate. It's a waning sesquisquadrate. Yes. 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 Okay, that's it. The aspects are right. The dates and degrees are right. It's my head that's wrong. I had waxing instead of waning. So let me back us up here, okay? Because yes, Jupiter had its oppositions to Chiron in 2016. These are waning sesquisquadrates. My apologies. From full to last quarter. Okay, full to last quarter. So erase the last few minutes. When we go from full phase to last quarter, this is, last quarter is, the second half of the zodiac is relationships, okay? And we go from Libra one-on-one to Scorpio intimacy, and then to broader and broader relationships as we go through Sag, Capricorn, Aquarius, all the way to Pisces, ultimately to Source and rebirth again. So full phase is where we've had to adjust, learn how to be in relationships. And then when we go into last quarter phase, this is where we want to take in as much as we can from society, okay? Last quarter is yin, or disseminating. Boy, okay, Kimmery, I threw myself off. It's going from full phase to disseminating. Disseminating phase is where we want to take in as much as we can from society, as broadly as we can. And when we get to the last quarter square and last quarter phase, crises in consciousness, we've taken it in from society, then we have to share it with society and release it from society and release it until it comes to the ultimate relationship, balsamic phase source. That's how that cycle goes. So here is the waning sesquisquadrate from full to disseminating phase, and it requires adjustments in society to move into disseminating phase. And to give you another example from the United States perspective with the school shooting, here are these young adults, okay, Pluto Scorpios, Jupiter's going over their natal Pluto and Scorpios in 1 year, and they're having the adjustment to society and standing up to society and going, you don't get to do this anymore. And to the degree that we are learning how to adjust and incorporate into society, or specifically in these young Pluto Scorpio cases, standing up to society, then you will get to the waning trine and you have the potential to see the rewards. And then of course we'll come to the last quarter square. There will only be one, and then the conjunction, and the host cycle will start over again with the intuition of Jupiter opening up to Chiron and expanding our ability to heal. So, oh, why didn't I just do this? Duh. I have done a lot of prepping over the last 5-6 days. Thank you for bearing with me. Here it is. You can laugh with me as I laugh at myself. Here's everything that I was talking about, and the distortions, rage and anger carried out into actions, or forcing societies to consider its citizens, as in the case of the gun shooting in Florida. But from a more broader perspective, how are we going to take care of all of our citizens? And of course, the potential to expand personal intuition to collective actions. And then I even put in a slide on Jupiter's waning trine and waning squares. And here's where I wanted to point out that Jupiter in Capricorn will be the only Capricorn planet to actually square Chiron in Aries. Saturn did it from Virgo Pisces, and Chiron won't have a square to Pluto until it goes into Taurus. However, Jupiter Chiron will be a part of crumbling old realities, Capricorn. Potential to have intuitive hits on how we want to rebuild with whatever old realities don't work anymore. This one is just a photo. I wanted to find the word God Goddess, but it's not there. But it helps you point out with Chiron and Jupiter, and Chiron's moving into Aries, and the potential on conscious levels with Jupiter to just, you know, really have a shedding of the dogma of religion and some breakthroughs that, you know, we're all one species here on planet Earth. Pointing out Chiron and the nodes of the moon. While Chiron is in Aries, we will have it square the nodes of the moon one time. As you can see here on your screen, it'll happen in 2020 when we have North Node at 5 Cancer, South Node 5 Capricorn. This will be a part of all the planets in Capricorn in 2020, because we'll have the nodes of the moon in Cancer Capricorn all the way through 2019 and the first part of 2020. And so Chiron, when Chiron squares the nodes, you know, of course you have that potential to create skip steps within your soul when it's active transiting planets. And so what will happen during this early 2020 time period is there'll be emotional choice points to either heal or re-wound ourselves. And when the nodes are square Chiron, that will be that, you know, the closer it is around to that spring equinox in 2020, the more vulnerable the time period will be. With the degrees that Chiron moves through Aries, it's possible that the orb of influence could be an entire 6-7 month time period. Now, the conjunction of the North Node to Chiron will then come along in 2024 towards the end of the transit in Aries. It can be another one of those major potentials to jumpstart us forward. There will only be the one conjunction in 2024, but then remember 3 conjunctions to Aries in 2025, 26. The node, North Node, will have made its conjunction to Aries in the tail end of 2023. Nodes go backwards. So we'll have that time period there where in the midst of the U.S. first Pluto return, transiting Pluto in Capricorn to natal Pluto in Capricorn, these 3, Chiron and Aries, being brought into the picture by the nodal axis, that'll be part of the story during that time period. A little far out to know exactly how it's going to have specific impact and part of the dance, but it will be drawn into the picture on a direct emotional level, personally and collectively, in some way. Now, Chiron in the inner planets, other than the fact that they have an annual journey, Mars biannual, you know, it's just an annual opportunity to look at the wounding to each of these inner planets and to heal the wounds of each of those inner planets. One point, it will be emphasized if you have natal inner planets with direct aspects to natal Chiron. If you were born with Mercury conjunct Chiron, the transits of Mercury will always bring potential for healing. The transits of Chiron will bring potential to heal your Mercury factor, how you communicate, how you process information, how your left brain works. So if you have a natal planet or planets in aspect to Chiron, both the forecasting travels of natal planets, and Chiron will continue to have that alchemizing effect. And you can, you could get real specific with this, and you could just make it a study project to literally go through and, just observe it in your own chart. You have a lifetime of Chiron working to help you heal any of the wounds and distortions around that planetary archetype or archetypes, regardless of the aspect. The aspect is just going to describe more detail to the wounding and describe the detail of how you have the potential to heal. Okay, that's the end of my slides. So hopefully I've been able to give you some ideas and suggestions, opportunities, archetypes of how you will work with Chiron and Aries that along through charts, along with various outer planets as they continue their journey through the zodiac, even when they don't have a specific aspect to Chiron. One more time, Chiron in Aries is going to be activating every single one of those souls who were born with a Chiron opposition. And that's a lot of us on planet Earth. I used to be afraid of the dark until I learned that I am the light and the darkness is afraid of me. May Chiron in Aries bring you all the light in the world you need to shine on your darkness and help you heal your shadows. Here is the slides for the dates as we move into Chiron in Aries Part 2 through all 12 houses. And here are the dates of the same series we'll do with Uranus in Taurus, as well as Mercury retrograde in Aries. And I did not look at the dates to see when Mercury's retrograde. Hold on. I have it right here. I can tell you at this minute that Chiron is retrograde 16 to 4 degrees Aries. It's not going to make any conjunctions to Chiron this year.
Mercury's retrograde there.
Mercury. Yeah, Mercury retrograde. It won't make any conjunctions to Chiron, but they'll be pretty simpatico with each other as they're in the same sign and wanting to initiate things forward, because Mercury goes stationary direct April 15th, 5 degrees Aries, and Chiron goes into Aries April 18th. I'll give you details on that with the free Mercury retrograde in Aries on March 19th. Questions, Leroy? Comments?
Maybe you can back up one slide for a minute. I just want to point something out to everybody on the call tonight. Thank you for participating with us. So we put on a little coupon code for any and all of our forecasting webinar PDFs to date. So most people on this call will know where our webinars pages are. We got two types of pages. The forecasting, of course, is time sensitive, and we have the Jupiter and Scorpio series there, Saturn and Capricorn, as this slide denotes, and then the educational is not time sensitive. We have a lot of PDFs available there, all 30% off by applying the coupon code Saturn. No need to capitalize Saturn. I think I don't think those codes are case sensitive, so just SATURN to get your 30% off. So stock up now. That's a limited offer for the next couple of weeks.
Do you have an expiration date? I can put that on the slide for anybody who catches up with the.
Oh, we talked about that. We think we might want to go through Uranus and Taurus series yet, so probably another month or so. Let's just kind of leave it open.
Okay, if you're listening to this in the future, just go try and apply the coupon code and see if it's still active. And if it's not, just go make a plea to Leroy.
Yeah, make an appeal to Media Monkey. He's usually pretty easy on discounts.
Hey, he's easy on webinar discounts. Let's not make that a broad statement, Media Monkey. Okay?
No, we're not easy on. Yeah, we don't discount every. Well, we just feel very grateful that these transits now that are showing themselves in the sky are long-term transits. You're looking at an 8-year transit here, Uranus and Taurus, long-term transit going through the sign of Taurus.
Well,
Saturn and Capricorn, 5 years.
Well, and again, if I can just review a minute. Chiron's transit through Aries. Of course, we saw the aspects with Jupiter, and we saw the waning semi-sextiles with Uranus that are going on. It may not seem like there's a lot of Chiron in Aries aspects. One more time, do not discount its potential opportunities, because just by virtue of initiating a new cycle in Aries, it's going to activate any natal Chiron aspects you have to planets, and it's going to activate all of these natal Chiron oppositions to Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto.
Yep. A lot of value with all of our webinar PDFs, as most people have figured out by now. But yes, take advantage of the sale. And thank you.
Well, and I'm a little tired. I put in a lot of work with these two webinars. And then in between that, I did a segment 1 month webinar, which I do every month. So yeah, I will say I need some Chiron in Pisces downtime, and I've given myself a couple of days off here coming up Thursday and Friday so I can get in gear for next week. But I have to say I enjoy doing this, even though I have to admit some tiredness, but I enjoyed it. I felt my own evolutionary expansion relating to Chiron just in the prep for all of this. I hope it's as helpful to each and every one of you who listen tonight and listen into the future. All the best, and your own personal never-ending journey to the core of your soul and healing along the way every step. And I will see you next week as we start part 2 of Chiron and Aries through the 12 houses. Thank you. Oh, any questions or comments, Leroy?
Nope, we're clear. We just got some thank yous coming through on the Q&A board, so we appreciate those responses, and we'll talk again next week. Again, we're going to go for 3 consecutive Monday and Wednesday nights on Chiron through the houses.
We're going to go for 3. Oh, yeah. Yep. Okay. I'm so right brain. When I have to engage my left brain, it's like, oh, wait a minute.
It's very entertaining for me to know when you're tired too. I know. You did a great job, honey. Thanks for all the work.
Oh, all right. Thank you, everyone.